I'm talking about the betrayal of Judas in Luke chapter 22, verses 3 through 6. And it shares that he deliberately went to go confer with the elites of their time, the chief priests, the scribes, these powerful people, and to sell out Jesus. And I want to reflect and meditate some more on like one particular possible reason. There's like the Bible doesn't give you exactly the reason, but there's a lot of pointers and hints. And one of the things is that he thought that Jesus was going to be this very triumphant king, and all around the time, whether it was their own disciples, him and his fellow disciples, or even the elite theologians of the time, they really seem to not have any expectation or understanding that Jesus was saying that he's going to be a suffering king, a suffering servant, as it says, as it is prophesied in the book of Isaiah. And he explicitly says, I'm going to get rejected, I'm going to get murdered, I'm going to be crucified. So he told them that explicitly, and they seem to not, it must have been shocking and confusing. But as they're going more and more, I think I can just easily imagine that Judas was saying, I wasn't looking for this. I didn't expect my king to be a suffering king, to be the Christ, to be a suffering savior. And that's something I really would like to sit in a little bit. I think it's such a common thing in today's, American Christianity, maybe in Christianity all throughout the ages and all kinds of countries, but especially so in American Christianity. We as a generation of Americans, we just absolutely hate suffering. Just any kind of suffering, any kind of, like, if it hurts emotionally, physically, anything, like, it's like we have to be able to just, rid our whole life of any kind of suffering. We work so hard to make sure that even the possibility of suffering, if there's even, very remote risks, like that can't possibly happen. And so we just go out of our way to make sure that, there's all kinds of, ways that we do things in our culture so that even seemingly remote risks can't happen, because we are super suffering avoidant. And I would like to say that it's a very common thing today that I think people who are Christians, that I'm not talking about heretics, people who believe, they say, I'm a Bible believing, like I believe the Bible's an inerrant word. I'm an theologically orthodox Christian who really truly believes in the gospel. I accept Jesus my Savior, and I'm a follower of his. But we regularly have this other thing going on that we don't say out loud, which is that we want Jesus to give us a nice life, a good life. And a good life entails the no suffering. And yet it's very explicit in the Bible that Jesus very intentionally goes to suffering. And he goes to suffering for other people's sake. He incurs costs. So that following Jesus, that's what we say. We're followers of Jesus. We're disciples of Jesus, which simply means to be a follower of him. That means you follow him into cost. You're following him to loving other people, to laying your life down for other people, and maybe even just sharing in the fallenness and the hurts of the world. And nowhere in the Bible it says that if you follow Jesus, your life is going to turn out all nice. There are people who want to preach that, you get your best life now, and that means no suffering. You're going to make really great money, great success. Everything's going to go great for you. But it does not teach that in the Bible. And in fact, Jesus quite frankly teaches, he goes like, well, if you follow me, you're going to share in my suffering. Pick up your cross. And at the very least, you're going to love other people. Forgive them 70 times 70. You know how painful it is to forgive someone who's really, really seriously hurt you and then forgive them repeatedly? That's a call to suffering. I'm not even talking about being rejected by the world or losing money or getting a disease, but he never promised that we wouldn't, taste suffering. But there's so many people today, they embrace Jesus. I love that he forgives my sins. Maybe they have an emotional experience when they're a teenager or something like that, and then they follow Jesus. And then as they grow older, they have all their plans. We have all these plans for our life, and then when our plans don't work out, we get really angry at God. It's like, God, what kind of God is that? Like, I thought, Jesus, you were there for me. I thought you loved me. And yet we seem to expect that our God is going to be some kind of like great helicopter parent. That God is like a helicopter mom who hovers over us and makes sure that we never suffer. And if we fall down and skin, he's immediately like, oh, they pick us up and comfort us and tells us everything's going to be okay. But like if we fall down or something really bad happens or we get hurt, and then it doesn't seem like God loves us because he's all nice to us, and then we goes, why did you even let that happen? We think he's not good, that he's not loving. But part of the purposes of God, there are all kinds of purposes of God. It entails the suffering. And our Savior is a God who went to suffering. He's a suffering servant. He came to incur cost. And there's something really profound and beautiful and loving in that. And so many of us, I don't think we're going to learn the deep, deep, true love and righteousness and power of our God if we're super suffering avoidant and super suffering allergic. I think this spirit that we have in American Christianity, in America today, it's a lot like Judas, actually. I think Judas thought, I didn't sign up for this. And suffering, no thanks. I'm going to find a way to get out of it. I'm going to avoid this. And I'm going to see if I can get something out of it. And that's, I think so often that's how we think. So today, some people would say, I don't betray Jesus, but how many young people said that they're going to believe in Jesus, they're going to follow Jesus, 3-4 years later, they're not even going to church. They're selling out Jesus just to party on the weekend. Or they're, over time, following Jesus seems to have all these other costs to it of not getting more fun or not getting ahead in your life or, having to actually give your money to church or to the poor. And all of that seems, burdensome. And so it seems to kind of incur cost. And so it's easier to just say, I don't know if this Jesus stuff is right for me. And so it's a kind of slower, soft way of being Judas. It's really common in our society. And there's lots of people who, of course, at one point they did believe in Jesus. Then they said, I don't believe in Jesus. Until later on, then the serious bottom dropped out of their life. And then, thankfully, they had a chance to come back to Jesus like Peter. Peter betrayed. Now, at the end of the day, what's the difference between Peter and Judas? Not much. They both backstabbed Jesus. They both sold him out. They both did that because they thought, I'm going to avoid some suffering and I'm going to save my own neck and get some advantage from me. But the difference between them is one, he thought, I'm going to try to atone for my own sin. I feel super guilty about this. I'm going to kill myself. It's straight out of like a righteousness of myself out of honor. This is why the Japanese, for instance, have this practice called the harakiri, where you take a sword and you cut your stomach open, because if you break your own honor, in other words, you fail the righteousness that you should live up to, and you fail other people, they expect you to kill yourself. And, well, Judas did harakiri because he's trying to atone for his own sin and his own betrayal and the fact that, he just didn't really want to go through what Jesus was offering. But Peter, he allowed the atonement of Christ to cover over his sin. He asked for the forgiveness of Christ, the restoration of Christ, the reconciliation, so that even though he did a heinous, horrible sin against Jesus, he can come back and he can have another life. So I want to ask you, if you've ever been a person who have done this already, you've already kind of like sold out Jesus, or you're maybe you were guilty of it recently, and you're wondering, can you come back? I want to say, yes, you can come back. Think about Peter. Be like Peter. We think he's the best, but really he knew he was the worst. And all of us are capable of the worst. But Jesus came to atone and forgive us for that sin, those sins too. That's what makes him so precious and so great and worthy of costs in the world, and to endure suffering and costs. He did it for us. And when we do it for him, and when we do it for others around us. And so if you're a follower of Jesus today, I want you to just think about this. How do you think about Jesus? And are you very, very suffering avoidant? Or do you think maybe knowing Jesus, walking with Jesus, the suffering is part of it. It's a necessary part of it. And when it comes, let me learn how to face it, even embrace it with courage and faith and perseverance and deep, deep love for Jesus and those around me.